Hillary Clinton had survived everything: Whitewater, Travelgate, the email investigation, Benghazi hearings plural, 30 years of congressional investigations, and she had walked away from every single one with her power intact. So when she learned that some former prosecutor named Kash Patel wanted to question her before the Senate Judiciary Committee, she almost laughed. Another partisan attack, another chance to demonstrate her unshakable composure under fire. Her legal team had prepared the usual defenses. Her media allies were ready with the usual narratives. This would be over in hours, just like all the others. But when Clinton entered the hearing room, something felt different. Patel wasn't shuffling papers nervously like the others had. He wasn't grandstanding for cameras. He sat perfectly still, a worn leather briefcase beside him, watching her with the patient expression of a man who had already won. "Secretary Clinton," he said as she took her seat, "I've spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor. I've put away cartel bosses, terrorists, and corrupt politicians who thought they were untouchable." He opened the briefcase. None of them had evidence files this thick. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room crackled with electric tension as C-SPAN cameras rolled live to millions of Americans who sensed this would be different from every other political hearing they'd ever witnessed. The air itself seemed charged with the anticipation of constitutional reckoning, as if the very foundations of American government were about to be shaken to their core. Kash Patel entered the chamber with the measured confidence of a federal prosecutor who had spent years building the case of the century. His weathered leather briefcase, the same one he'd carried through countless deep state investigations, contained enough classified evidence to topple governments and expose corruption that reached the highest levels of American power. Unlike the typical Washington power players with their expensive suits and political theater, Patel carried himself with the no-nonsense bearing of someone who had served as both prosecutor and public defender, someone who understood government from the inside and wasn't intimidated by political royalty. His unassuming appearance, simple dark suit, government-issue briefcase, and the focused demeanor of a career investigator, stood in stark contrast to the explosive nature of what he was about to unleash. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chairman Chuck Grassley announced, as the room fell into expectant silence, "we're here for an emergency oversight hearing on systematic government corruption, abuse of classified information, and potential criminal conspiracies involving former senior government officials. Today, the American people will finally get the accountability they've been demanding for decades." Patel settled into his chair with the unhurried confidence of a prosecutor who had just walked into his opponent's political funeral. His preparation was meticulous, his evidence devastating, and his commitment to government accountability unshakable. For years, he had investigated the deep state's most protected operations. Today, he would expose its most protected operative. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton entered through the chamber's rear doors, flanked by a phalanx of the most expensive attorneys money could buy. Despite her forced smile and practiced confidence, something in her eyes suggested she knew this wasn't going to be another friendly media interview or softball congressional appearance. The former First Lady Senator and Secretary of State, who had dominated American politics for 3 decades, was about to face a former federal prosecutor who had dedicated his career to exposing government corruption. Her decades of political experience were about to meet someone who knew every trick, every evasion, every method she'd used to escape accountability. "How fitting that former Secretary Clinton chose to attend today's hearing," Grassley observed with barely concealed anticipation. "Mr. Patel, please proceed with your presentation of evidence." Patel's eyes met Clinton's across the chamber. In that moment, the former Secretary of State realized she wasn't facing another partisan political attack or media controversy. She was staring down a former federal prosecutor who had come armed with classified evidence and wasn't planning to leave any government corruption unexposed. "Mr. Chairman," Patel began, his voice carrying the distinctive authority of someone who had spent years prosecuting government officials, "what I'm about to present represents the most systematic abuse of government power, mishandling of classified information, and corruption of American institutions in our nation's history. We're talking about crimes that make Watergate look like a parking ticket." The stage was set for the most consequential government accountability hearing in American history. On one side, Kash Patel, the former federal prosecutor armed with years of classified evidence and an unshakable commitment to exposing deep state corruption. On the other, Hillary Clinton, whose decades-long political career was about to be revealed as an elaborate criminal conspiracy against the American people. But first, let me tell you about the evidence Patel had compiled. For years, his position within the intelligence community and Department of Justice had given him access to classified information that painted a picture of corruption so vast, so systematic, that even Clinton's media allies would be forced to acknowledge the truth. During his time as a House Intelligence Committee investigator, Pentagon Chief of Staff, and DOJ National Security Division prosecutor, Patel had built what legal experts were calling the most comprehensive case of government corruption in American history. The evidence wasn't based on political opposition research or media speculation. It was built from classified government documents, FBI investigations, and intelligence community assessments that had been hidden from public view. The folders were organized, the witnesses prepared, and the American people were watching. What they were about to see would restore their faith in government accountability and remind them that in America, no one, absolutely no one, is above the law, no matter how politically protected they might seem. The government accountability reckoning had begun. The deep state's most protected operative was about to face the justice that had been delayed for decades but would no longer be denied. Patel opened his first folder with the precision of a federal prosecutor presenting evidence to a grand jury. The folder was thick-bound with FBI and DOJ classification stamps and seemed to pulse with the weight of systematic government corruption about to be exposed. Secretary Clinton, he began, his prosecutorial voice cutting through the chamber's silence like a constitutional sword. You know what they say in federal court? The evidence doesn't lie even when government officials do. Today we're going to see if your private email server story holds up to the scrutiny of actual classified evidence. Clinton straightened in her chair, surrounded by her legal team like generals protecting a fortress under siege. Mr. Patel, she replied with the practiced confidence of someone who had survived decades of political attacks, I welcome any questions about my email practices. As I've stated many times, I fully cooperated with all investigations and used my private email for convenience, exactly as previous secretaries of state had done. Well, now that's interesting, Patel said, his prosecutor's instincts immediately detecting the carefully crafted political language. Because I have FBI technical analysis here that tells a very different story about your convenience. Clinton's confidence surged as she prepared to deliver her well-rehearsed explanations about email systems and government IT policies. This was safe territory, technical discussions that most people found boring perfect for deflecting serious scrutiny with bureaucratic complexity. Mr. Patel, as Secretary of State, I dealt with an enormous volume of correspondence, she began, her voice gaining strength with each familiar talking point. The State Department's email system was notoriously inadequate for the demands of modern diplomacy. My use of a private server was approved by department IT officials and was designed to ensure I could effectively communicate with both government and non-government contacts. She gestured with the practiced authority of someone who had testified before Congress many times. Every work-related email was preserved and turned over to the State Department. The FBI conducted an exhaustive investigation and concluded that while my email practices were not ideal, they found no evidence of criminal intent. The audience of government accountability advocates nodded politely. This was the Hillary Clinton they expected, confident, detailed, completely in control of the narrative. She was delivering her standard explanations with the precision of someone who had refined them through years of investigations. But Patel sat quietly, occasionally making notes on a legal pad, that patient prosecutor's expression never wavering. He wasn't impressed by the political performance, and somehow that made it less impressive to everyone listening. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, reaching into his briefcase with the deliberate movements of a prosecutor about to present devastating evidence. I appreciate that well-rehearsed explanation, but as a former federal prosecutor, I prefer FBI technical analysis to political talking points. He pulled out a thick stack of documents bearing official FBI forensic laboratory seals. These are the actual FBI technical reports on your private email server, Not the public summaries, but the detailed forensic analysis that was classified and withheld from congressional oversight. Clinton's smile faltered slightly as she watched Patel arrange the documents with prosecutorial precision. I'm not sure what additional technical details could be relevant. The FBI investigation was thorough and concluded. The FBI investigation concluded a lot of things that weren't shared with Congress or the American people. Patel interrupted, his voice taking on the edge of a prosecutor who had caught a witness in a prepared lie. He held up the first forensic report. According to FBI digital forensics experts, your private server was configured with security settings that were deliberately designed to avoid government archival systems. This wasn't convenience, Secretary Clinton. This was systematic circumvention of federal record-keeping laws. Patel displayed the technical specifications on the chamber's monitors, pointing to specific configurations that only computer experts would understand. Your server was equipped with commercial-grade encryption specifically designed to prevent government IT security systems from accessing or monitoring communications. That's not convenience, that's concealment. Clinton's attorneys began frantically whispering in her ear, but Patel was just getting started. But here's what the FBI technical analysis really shows. Your server wasn't just avoiding government oversight, it was actively designed to hide classified information from the very security systems designed to protect it. Patel reached for another section of forensic reports, these marked with even higher classification levels. Secretary Clinton, the FBI forensic analysis identified 2093 email chains containing classified information on your private server, not the 110 that were publicly disclosed, 2093. The number hit Clinton like a physical blow, but Patel wasn't finished with his prosecutorial precision. Of those 2093 classified email chains, 847 contained information classified at the secret level 326, contained top-secret information, and 67 contained information classified at special access program levels, the most sensitive intelligence in the American government. Clinton tried to interrupt with her standard defense about retroactive classification, but Patel held up a prosecutor's hand. Ma'am, these forensic reports show that 1739 of those classified emails were marked as classified at the time they were sent. They weren't retroactively classified. They were classified when you put them on your private server. The forensic evidence that followed was devastating. Screen captures showing classified markings, metadata proving when classification occurred, and technical analysis demonstrating that Clinton's server had systematically stripped classification markings from government emails. Secretary Clinton, Patel said with prosecutorial authority, you didn't accidentally receive classified information on your private server. You systematically moved classified information from secure government systems to your private server, removing classification markings in the process. B. Just as Clinton was preparing her defense about IT complexity being beyond her expertise, Patel gestured toward the chamber's rear entrance. I think the American people deserve to hear from someone who actually managed your private server. The doors opened and a nervous-looking man in his 30s entered under federal protection. His appearance immediately identified him as a technical professional rather than a political operative. Ladies and gentlemen, Patel announced, Mr. Brian Poliano, the IT specialist who set up and maintained Secretary Clinton's private email server under federal immunity agreement. Clinton's horror was immediate and visible. Poliano was supposed to be protected by immunity agreements and political loyalty. How had Patel convinced him to testify publicly about the server's true purpose? Pagliano took his seat at the witness table, adjusting the microphone with hands that trembled from the weight of finally telling the truth. I was hired by Secretary Clinton's staff to create an email system that would give her complete control over her communications without government oversight. His testimony was technically detailed and legally devastating. The server configuration I was instructed to implement was specifically designed to prevent government IT security systems from accessing, monitoring, or archiving Secretary Clinton's communications. Patel leaned forward with prosecutorial focus. Mr. Poliano, in your technical expertise, was this server configuration consistent with federal record-keeping requirements? Absolutely not, Poliano replied without hesitation. Every aspect of the server design was intended to circumvent federal communication and record-keeping systems. This wasn't about convenience, it was about avoiding government oversight. The IT specialist's testimony continued with devastating technical details. Secretary Clinton's staff regularly instructed me to delete emails, remove classification markings, and modify metadata to hide the original sources of classified information. Patel wasn't finished with his technical evidence. He gestured to his staff, who wheeled in sophisticated computer equipment connected to large monitors. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, "You've claimed that the 33,000 emails deleted from your server were personal communications about yoga schedules and wedding planning. But FBI digital forensics recovered something very different." The monitors flickered to life, displaying actual email content that had been forensically recovered from Clinton's supposedly wiped server. These are the actual deleted emails recovered through NSA backup systems and FBI digital forensics. The first email displayed was devastating. "Hillary, the Benghazi hearing tomorrow requires us to coordinate our story about the security requests. Make sure all related emails are moved to the private system before the document request." Clinton's reaction was immediate and panicked. "Those emails are taken out of context, private communications between lawyers." Ma'am, Patel replied with prosecutorial calm. "Attorney-client privilege doesn't cover conspiracy to obstruct justice, and this email was sent to campaign staff, not attorneys." The recovered emails continued, each more damaging than the last. Communications about moving classified information to avoid congressional oversight, coordination with Clinton Foundation donors about State Department policy, and detailed instructions for destroying evidence. Patel reached for his final folder in this round, marked with FBI criminal investigation seals. "Secretary Clinton," Patel said, his prosecutorial voice becoming more pointed, "let's talk about what happened when you learned Congress was investigating your email server." The evidence he presented was methodical and damning. On March 4, 2015, the House Select Committee on Benghazi sent a preservation notice requiring you to maintain all records related to your tenure as Secretary of State. Patel displayed official congressional correspondence. On March 25, 2015, 21 days after receiving the preservation notice, your IT staff used BleachBit software to permanently delete 33,000 emails from your server. The timeline was prosecutorially devastating. On March 31, 2015, your staff used hammers to physically destroy mobile devices that contained copies of your server communications. Clinton's defense was weak and legalistic. Those emails were personal communications that had no relevance to any investigation. We had every right to delete personal files. Patel's response was swift and prosecutorial. Secretary Clinton, using specialized deletion software and physical destruction of evidence after receiving a congressional preservation notice, isn't personal file management, it's obstruction of justice. He displayed FBI forensic reports showing the technical methods used to destroy evidence. BleachBit software is designed to prevent digital forensics recovery. Hammer destruction of devices is designed to prevent physical evidence recovery. This wasn't routine file deletion. It was systematic evidence destruction. Patel stood for his final presentation of this round, his voice carrying the full authority of a federal prosecutor. "Secretary Clinton," he began, "the FBI concluded there was no criminal intent behind your email server. But I have evidence here that shows the FBI was either incompetent or compromised in reaching that conclusion." He began displaying internal Clinton staff emails recovered through digital forensics. "We need to make sure the server configuration can't be traced back to deliberate security violations." From one email between Clinton aides. Another email was even more damaging. "Hillary is concerned that standard government email will be subject to FOIA requests and congressional oversight. The private server needs to be configured to avoid any government access." The evidence of criminal intent was overwhelming. emails discussing how to avoid government oversight technical configurations designed to circumvent security protocols and systematic evidence destruction when investigations began. Secretary Clinton, Patel said with prosecutorial finality, this evidence shows systematic intentional violations of federal record-keeping laws, mishandling of classified information laws, and obstruction of justice. This wasn't convenience or poor judgment. It was a criminal conspiracy to hide your communications from the American people. The first round was over. Patel had systematically destroyed Clinton's email server narrative with FBI forensic evidence witness testimony and recovered communications that revealed systematic criminal intent. But as he reached for his second folder marked with Clinton Foundation financial investigation seals, his expression suggested that email crimes were merely the foundation for something far more corrupt. "Round one's done, Secretary Clinton," he said with terrifying prosecutorial calm. "But now we need to talk about what you were so desperate to hide in those emails. We need to talk about how you sold American foreign policy to the highest bidders." The email server scandal, hidden behind claims of convenience and technical confusion, had been exposed as a systematic criminal conspiracy. But Patel's expression indicated that the financial corruption revealed in those recovered emails would make the server crimes look like preparation for the main event. The 15-minute recess felt like an eternity for Hillary Clinton. She sat hunched in a side room, her team of expensive attorneys huddled around her like crisis managers around a sinking campaign. The confidence that had carried her through decades of political scandals was evaporating like morning mist under the harsh light of prosecutorial scrutiny. "Secretary Clinton," her lead attorney whispered urgently, "Patel clearly has access to classified evidence we didn't know existed. We need to consider—" "Absolutely not," Clinton hissed, though her voice lacked its usual commanding authority. "This is another partisan witch hunt designed to destroy me politically. I can handle some former prosecutor with government delusions." But deep down, Clinton knew something fundamental had changed. The FBI forensics, the recovered emails, the witness testimony, it was all too precise, too systematic. Patel hadn't just stumbled onto this evidence. He'd been building a prosecutorial case with federal investigation precision. When the hearing reconvened, Patel sat calmly at his table, a new folder placed prominently in front of him. This one was thicker than the first, bound with Treasury Department and Foreign Agent Registration Act seals that seemed to pulse with financial corruption significance. "Mr. Patel," Chairman Grassley announced, "you may continue with your presentation of evidence." Patel stood slowly, his movements deliberate and prosecutorial like a federal investigator who had found the perfect corruption case. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Secretary Clinton," he said, turning to face her directly, "let's talk about what you were really hiding in those emails. Let's talk about how you turned the State Department into a profit center for your family foundation." Clinton straightened in her chair, attempting to project confidence she didn't feel. "Mr. Patel, the Clinton Foundation is one of the world's most respected charitable organizations. We've helped millions of people access clean water, HIV medications, and economic opportunity. Any suggestion of impropriety is baseless partisan attack." Patel's smile was prosecutorially gentle. "Secretary Clinton, that's a beautiful charitable mission statement. But I have Treasury Department financial analysis here that shows your foundation operated more like a money laundering operation than a charity." He opened the folder with deliberate ceremony, revealing complex financial flow charts and banking records that immediately commanded attention. "You see, when you're investigating financial corruption, you follow the money, and the money tells a very different story than your charitable press releases." Patel pulled out his first analysis, a comprehensive timeline that filled the chamber's entire monitor system. "Secretary Clinton, this chart shows every major Clinton Foundation donation over $100,000 during your tenure as Secretary of State, cross-referenced with the State Department policy decisions that benefited those same donors. The correlation was statistically impossible to explain as coincidence. 47 major policy decisions, 47 corresponding foundation donations averaging $2.3 million per policy change. That's not charitable giving. That's a price list for American foreign policy. Clinton's defense was immediate and rehearsed. The Clinton Foundation maintains strict ethical walls between charitable activities and any government service. Donations are made to support humanitarian causes, not to influence policy decisions. Is that so? Patel asked, producing another document. Because I have State Department internal communications here that suggest your ethical walls were more like revolving doors. Patel moved to a presentation easel that had been set up during the break, displaying a chart that showed speaking fees received by both Clintons during Hillary's tenure as Secretary of State. Secretary Clinton, Patel began, let's talk about your family's speaking fees. These aren't foundation donations. These are direct payments to you and your husband for speeches. The financial data was staggering. Between 2009 and 2013, while you served as Secretary of State, your husband received $48 million in speaking fees. The average fee was $750,000 per speech, more than 4 times your annual government salary for a single speech. Patel pointed to specific entries on the chart. But here's what's interesting from a corruption investigation perspective. The organizations paying these extraordinary fees were often foreign governments and corporations that had business before the State Department. The timeline he presented was prosecutorially devastating. March 15, 2010, Russian uranium company Uranium One seeks State Department approval for American uranium mining rights. March 22, 2010, Bill Clinton receives $500,000 speaking fee from Russian investment bank promoting Uranium One deal. Clinton tried to interrupt, but Patel continued his prosecutorial presentation. June 8, 2011, Colombian government seeks State Department approval for controversial trade agreement. June 15, 2011, Bill Clinton receives $800,000 speaking fee from Colombian Energy Consortium supporting the trade deal. The pattern was undeniable and systematically corrupt. Secretary Clinton, these weren't coincidental speaking opportunities. These were systematic payments for State Department policy decisions laundered through speaking fees to avoid foreign agent registration requirements. Patel reached for a folder marked with Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States CFIUS seals, some of the most sensitive government financial documents. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, let's examine the Uranium One transaction in detail because it represents the perfect case study in how you monetized American national security. The classified CFIUS documents were displayed on monitors showing the complex approval process for foreign acquisition of American strategic assets. Uranium One controlled 20% of American uranium production capacity. Russian acquisition of this asset required unanimous approval from 9 government agencies, including your State Department. Patel's prosecutorial analysis was methodical and damning. The Russian company seeking to acquire Uranium One was Rosatom, controlled directly by Vladimir Putin's government. Approval of this transaction gave Putin control over 20% of American uranium production. The financial connections he revealed were staggering. During the CFIUS review process, Russian individuals connected to the Uranium One deal donated $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. Your husband received $500,000 from Russian sources. You received classified briefings showing this transaction posed national security risks. Clinton's response was defensive and weak. I wasn't the deciding vote on CFIUS. Multiple agencies had to approve this transaction. Any suggestion that foundation donations influenced my official duties is conspiracy mongering. Patel's prosecutorial response was swift and devastating. Secretary Clinton, I have your internal State Department communications about this transaction. Would you like me to read what you really thought about Russian uranium acquisition? Before Clinton could respond, Patel gestured toward the gallery where several distinguished individuals had been seated during the break. I think the American people should hear from some folks who worked on this transaction directly. The first witness was a former State Department official whose appearance immediately commanded respect, someone with obvious senior government experience and no apparent political agenda. My name is Patricia Morrison, she began, her voice carrying the weight of career government service. I served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Resources during Secretary Clinton's tenure. I worked directly on the Uranium-1 CFE use review. Her testimony was devastating in its professional credibility. Secretary Clinton received multiple classified briefings indicating that Russian acquisition of American uranium assets posed significant national security risks. FBI counterintelligence specifically warned that this transaction could compromise American energy independence. Morrison continued with bureaucratic precision that made her testimony unassailable. Despite these classified warnings, Secretary Clinton instructed State Department CFI-US representatives to support the transaction. When I expressed concerns about national security implications, I was told that other considerations required approval. Patel's follow-up question was prosecutorially precise. Ms. Morrison, in your professional opinion, what were those other considerations? Foundation donations and speaking fees, Morrison replied without hesitation. It was understood within the department that certain policy decisions were influenced by Clinton Foundation financial interests. Patel returned to his evidence table and produced a folder marked with Foreign Agent Registration Act enforcement documents. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, federal law requires registration as a foreign agent when Americans receive payments from foreign governments in exchange for influencing U.S. policy. Let's examine your family's compliance with these requirements. The documentation he presented was comprehensive and legally damning. Treasury Department analysis shows that Clinton family entities received $78 million from foreign government sources during your State Department tenure. Not $1 was reported under Foreign Agent Registration Act requirements. Patel began displaying specific payment records. Ukrainian energy companies $13 million, Saudi government entities $25 million, Russian oligarchs connected to Putin $17 million, Chinese government-connected corporations $23 million. The scope of foreign payments was staggering and clearly criminal. Secretary Clinton, you were simultaneously serving as America's chief diplomat while receiving tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments seeking to influence American policy. That's not charitable giving, that's foreign agent activity. Clinton's denial was desperate and unconvincing. These payments went to legitimate charitable activities. The Clinton Foundation operates in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Patel's prosecutorial response was immediate. Secretary Clinton foreign agent registration law doesn't have a charitable exception. If you're receiving foreign government money while influencing U.S. policy, you're required to register as a foreign agent regardless of your claimed charitable purposes. Patel moved to a secure recording device that had been set up at his table. Secretary Clinton, remember those deleted emails we recovered from your server? Some of them contained very interesting discussions about Foundation operations. The monitors displayed actual email communications between Clinton and her staff about coordinating Foundation donations with State Department decisions. The content was devastating. Here's an email from you to Cheryl Mills. Need to coordinate Moroccan donation with trade policy announcement. Foundation needs the money, state needs the deal. That was sent 3 days before you announced a $12 billion trade agreement that heavily favored Moroccan interests. Another email was even more damaging. Foundation donors getting nervous about return on investment need to show more State Department deliverables to maintain donation levels. The evidence of systematic corruption was overwhelming. Email after email showing coordination between Foundation fundraising and State Department policy decisions with Clinton personally involved in ensuring donors received policy benefits. Patel stood for his final presentation of this round, his voice carrying the full authority of a federal prosecutor. Secretary Clinton, he began, what we've documented here isn't just about questionable ethical judgment or blurred lines between charity and government service. This is systematic criminal conspiracy to sell American foreign policy to foreign governments. He gestured to the mountain of financial evidence. You and your family received over $200 million from foreign sources while you served as Secretary of State. In exchange, those foreign donors received favorable State Department decisions worth billions of dollars. Patel's voice rose with prosecutorial indignation. You didn't just violate ethical guidelines. You violated foreign agent registration laws, federal bribery statutes, and conspiracy laws. You turned the State Department into a criminal enterprise with you as the boss. Clinton's response was incoherent and desperate. These are baseless allegations based on selective interpretation of legitimate charitable activities. This is exactly the kind of partisan attack that Americans are tired of. Patel's final words for this round were delivered with prosecutorial finality. Secretary Clinton, Americans are tired of something. They're tired of government officials selling out American interests to foreign governments for personal profit, and that's exactly what you did. The second round was over. Patel had systematically exposed Clinton's foundation as a criminal money laundering operation with Treasury Department records witness testimony and Clinton's own recovered communications. But as he reached for his third folder marked with CIA and Defense Department seals relating to Benghazi, his expression suggested that financial corruption was merely preparation for something far more deadly. "Round two's done, Secretary Clinton," he said with terrifying prosecutorial calm. "But now we need to talk about what happened when your corruption got Americans killed. We need to talk about Benghazi." The Clinton Foundation scandal, hidden behind claims of charitable work, had been exposed as systematic foreign influence peddling. But Patel's expression indicated that the Benghazi cover-up would reveal how Clinton's corruption had cost American lives. If Secretary Clinton thought the Foundation revelations were devastating, she was about to learn that Kash Patel was just getting warmed up. The former federal prosecutor reached for his third folder, this one bearing CIA and Defense Department seals that seemed to pulse with the weight of American blood spilled because of government failures. "Secretary Clinton," Patel began, his voice carrying new gravitas that filled the chamber with the solemnity of a memorial service. "If financial corruption was just about money, we might call it a day, but your corruption got Americans killed, and that's something we can never forgive or forget." Clinton's remaining attorneys were frantically whispering damage control strategies, but she seemed unable to hear them. Her eyes were fixed on Patel with the intensity of someone watching her political career's final moments. Patel opened his folder and moved to a sophisticated communications display system that had been set up during the break. "Secretary Clinton, let's talk about the night of September 11th, 2012, when your failures as Secretary of State resulted in the deaths of 4 Americans in Benghazi, Libya." Clinton straightened, attempting to project the authority she'd maintained through multiple congressional investigations. "Mr. Patel, I've testified extensively about the tragic events in Benghazi. While we all wish we could have prevented this terrorist attack, extensive investigations found no evidence of wrongdoing or dereliction of duty." "Is that so?" Patel asked, his prosecutorial instincts immediately detecting the carefully crafted political language designed to deflect responsibility. "Because I have classified communications from that night that tell a very different story about your response to Americans under attack." The monitors flickered to life, displaying actual Situation Room communications from September 11th, 2012. The timestamps and classification markings made clear these were real-time government communications during the attack. "These are the actual communications from the White House Situation Room, CIA Operations Center, and Defense Department during the Benghazi attack," Patel explained. "Not the sanitized summaries provided to Congress, but the real-time communications showing exactly what you knew and when you knew it." The first communication displayed was devastating. 9:42 p.m., CIA Station Chief Benghazi to CIA Director, coordinated military-style attack underway at consulate. Ambassador Stevens missing. This is organized terrorism, not demonstration. Patel continued reading. 10:15 p.m. Defense Secretary to Situation Room, military assets available for immediate deployment to Benghazi, awaiting authorization for cross-border operations. 10:32 p.m. Secretary Clinton to Situation Room, do not deploy military assets without full political clearance. Media narrative must be controlled before military response. Clinton's panic was beginning to show as she realized Patel had access to classified communications that revealed her actual decision-making during the crisis. Those communications are taken out of context. Military deployment decisions involve complex considerations that, Ma'am, Patel interrupted with prosecutorial authority. Americans were dying while you were worried about media narrative. Let me show you exactly what help was available and why it wasn't sent. Patel displayed a comprehensive military asset map showing American forces positioned throughout the Mediterranean and North Africa on September 11, 2012. At the time of the Benghazi attack, the following American military assets were within range for immediate deployment. Patel read from classified military documents. USS Kearsarge Amphibious Ready Group 2 hours flight time, Aviano Air Base F-16 Squadron 1.5 hours flight time, Sigonella Naval Air Station Rescue Team's 45 minutes flight time. The military capability was overwhelming and immediately available. Secretary Clinton, we had the power to save those Americans. The military was ready, willing, and able to deploy immediate assistance. Patel's voice became more pointed. But you personally issued stand-down orders to military commanders, not because help wasn't available, but because you were more concerned with political damage control than American lives. Clinton's response was defensive and desperate. Military deployments into hostile territory require careful consideration of risks and diplomatic implications. We couldn't risk escalating the situation or endangering more American lives. Patel's prosecutorial response was swift and devastating. Secretary Clinton, the situation was already escalated. Americans were under coordinated terrorist attack. The only question was whether you cared more about saving American lives or protecting your political future. Patel reached for another section of classified communications, these marked with State Department and White House coordination seals. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, let's talk about your immediate response to the attack. What story did you tell the American people about why 4 Americans died? Clinton attempted to regain control with her standard explanation. Initial intelligence suggested the attack may have been inspired by protests against an inflammatory YouTube video that had sparked demonstrations throughout the Muslim world. As more information became available, we updated our assessment. That's interesting, Patel replied, producing more classified communications, because your own real-time intelligence showed you knew this was coordinated terrorism from the very beginning. The evidence he displayed was prosecutorially devastating. Here's your communication to CIA Director Petraeus at 11:47 p.m. on September 11th. This was obviously planned terrorism. We need to coordinate response with political considerations for the election. Another communication was even more damaging. Here's your email to your daughter Chelsea at 11:12 p.m. 2 of our officers were killed in Libya by an al-Qaeda-like group. The ambassador is still missing. Patel's voice rose with moral indignation. Secretary Clinton, you told your own daughter the truth about terrorism within hours of the attack, but you spent weeks lying to the American people about a YouTube video. Patel's next revelation was even more personally devastating. Secretary Clinton, let's talk about what you told the families of the Americans who died because of your failures. He displayed communications between Clinton and the families of the Benghazi victims, including private conversations that had been classified to protect family privacy. Here's what you told Patricia Smith, mother of Sean Smith, at the coffin ceremony. We will make sure the person who made that awful video is prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The personal betrayal was complete. You looked a grieving mother in the eye and lied about why her son died. You blamed a YouTube video when you knew it was terrorism caused by your security failures. Patel continued with more family communications. Here's what you told Charles Woods, father of Tyrone Woods. That video was disgusting and reprehensible, and we will not rest until the person responsible is brought to justice. The evidence of systematic deception was overwhelming. Clinton had personally lied to grieving families while knowing the truth about what had caused their loved ones' deaths. Patel moved to a video display system showing Clinton's sworn testimony before multiple congressional committees compared side by side with the classified evidence of what she actually knew. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, you testified under oath before Congress about Benghazi multiple times. Let me show the American people how you committed perjury before their elected representatives. The split-screen display was prosecutorially devastating. On the left video of Clinton's sworn testimony, On the right, classified documents proving she knew the opposite of what she was swearing under oath. Here's you testifying. We had no actionable intelligence indicating an imminent attack on our facilities in Benghazi, Patel read as the video played. And here's CIA intelligence briefing you received on September 8, 2012. Credible intelligence indicates coordinated attack planned against U.S. facilities in Benghazi within 72 hours. The perjury was clear and undeniable. Statement after statement under oath, contradicted by classified evidence showing Clinton knew the opposite of what she was swearing to Congress. Patel opened his final section for this round revealing State Department internal communications about security requests from Benghazi that had been denied. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, let's talk about the security request from Ambassador Stevens that you personally denied in the months leading up to his death. The evidence was methodical and damning. August 2, 2012, Ambassador Stevens requests additional security personnel due to increasing terrorist activity. Your response, security requests must be balanced against budget considerations and political optics. Patel continued reading denied security requests. August 15th, request for military liaison team, denied. August 27th, request for diplomatic security extension, denied. September 4th, urgent request for immediate security reinforcement due to specific terrorist threats, denied. The pattern of security failures was systematic and deadly. Secretary Clinton Ambassador Stevens sent you 17 separate security requests in the 3 months before his death. You denied every single one. Clinton's response was weak and bureaucratic. Security decisions are made by career professionals based on comprehensive threat assessments and resource availability. I relied on expert recommendations from security professionals. Patel's prosecutorial response was immediate and devastating. Secretary Clinton, I have your handwritten notes on those security requests. You wrote too expensive and politically risky on Ambassador Stevens' final security request. Patel gestured toward the secure video connection that had been established for a classified military testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, Patel announced, due to operational security requirements, our next witness will testify via secure connection from an undisclosed location. The monitor displayed a figure in military uniform with voice modulation to protect operational security. I am Colonel James Mitchell, former commander of the Special Operations Response Team that was ordered to stand down during the Benghazi attack. The military testimony was devastating and filled with suppressed anger. My team was fully prepared and capable of reaching Benghazi within 2 hours of the initial attack. We had the equipment, the personnel, and the authorization to deploy immediate assistance. Colonel Mitchell's voice carried the weight of a professional warrior who had been prevented from saving American lives. At 11:17 p.m., we received direct orders from Secretary Clinton's office to stand down and not deploy to Benghazi. When I requested clarification, I was told that political considerations outweighed operational necessity. The human cost was staggering and personal. Mr. Patel, my team could have saved those Americans. We had the capability and the will to execute a successful rescue operation. Secretary Clinton chose politics over American lives. Patel stood for his final presentation of this round, his voice carrying the sacred authority of someone seeking justice for fallen Americans. Secretary Clinton, he began, what we've documented here today isn't about policy disagreements or partisan politics. This is about American blood on your hands because you chose political survival over American lives. His voice rose with moral authority that filled the chamber. You knew Benghazi was a terrorist attack within hours. You had military assets ready to respond. You received specific intelligence warnings. You denied security requests from Americans who trusted you to protect them. Patel's prosecutorial summation was devastating. And when 4 Americans died because of your failures, you lied to their families, lied to Congress, and lied to the American people to protect your political career. The third round was over. Patel had systematically exposed Clinton's Benghazi failures with classified communications military testimony and evidence of systematic deception that had cost American lives. But as he reached for his 4th folder marked with FBI and CIA seals relating to election interference, His expression suggested that getting Americans killed was merely preparation for something even more treasonous. Round three's done, Secretary Clinton, he said with terrifying prosecutorial calm. But now we need to talk about how you tried to destroy American democracy itself. We need to talk about your coup attempt. The Benghazi scandal, hidden behind claims of security complexity, had been exposed as systematic negligence that killed Americans. But Patel's expression indicated that Clinton's attack on American democracy would reveal the full extent of her anti-American activities. The chamber had transcended ordinary political theater and become something approaching a national security tribunal. Secretary Hillary Clinton sat like a statue of defeated ambition, her expensive suit wrinkled and her eyes vacant as the weight of exposed corruption pressed down upon her. But Kash Patel wasn't finished. The former federal prosecutor reached for his fourth folder marked with FBI and CIA seals that seemed to pulse with the weight of systematic attacks on American democracy itself. Secretary Clinton. Patel began, his voice carrying the sacred authority of someone defending the Constitution against its enemies. Everything we've discussed today, the server crimes, the foundation corruption, the Benghazi cover-up, all of it was preparation for your ultimate crime against America. All of it led to your attempt to overthrow a democratically elected president through government conspiracy. Patel's eyes bore into Clinton with the intensity of a prosecutor seeking justice for the highest crimes against constitutional government. We're about to talk about treason in its purest form. We're about to talk about your coup attempt against American democracy. Patel stood and moved to the center of the chamber, holding classified documents that immediately commanded attention through their obvious sensitivity and official markings. Secretary Clinton, Patel began, "You've spent years claiming that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump. But I have evidence here that shows you personally created and funded the entire Russia collusion hoax to cover up your own election crimes." Clinton tried to maintain some semblance of dignity. "Mr. Patel, Russian interference in our election is well documented by our intelligence agencies. Any suggestion that I created this story is conspiracy mongering that undermines our national security." "Is that so?" Patel asked, his prosecutorial instincts immediately detecting the deflection. "Because I have FBI documents here that show you personally funded the creation of fake intelligence designed to frame your political opponent for treason." The monitors flickered to life, displaying actual FBI investigative documents about the origins of the Steele dossier. These are FBI counterintelligence reports showing the real source of the so-called Russia investigation. Patel's prosecutorial presentation was methodical and devastating. The Steele dossier, the document that launched years of investigation into President Trump, was created by Christopher Steele using Russian disinformation sources, and you personally paid for its creation through your campaign and the DNC. The financial trail he revealed was comprehensive and damning. Perkins Coie law firm, $1.2 million from Clinton campaign. Fusion GPS, $168,000 from Perkins Coie. Christopher Steele, $160,000 from Fusion GPS. You created a money laundering scheme to hide your funding of fake intelligence against your political opponent. Patel reached for a folder marked with British intelligence cooperation seals, some of the most sensitive international intelligence sharing documents. Secretary Clinton. Patel continued, "Let's examine what Christopher Steele actually told the FBI about his dossier sources and credibility. The classified documents were stunning in their revelation of systematic deception. Here's Christopher Steele's debriefing with FBI agents in October 2016. He admits that his primary source was suspected Russian intelligence officer Igor Danchenko, and that much of the dossier was based on rumor and speculation." Patel's voice became more pointed. "Steele told the FBI that he considered his intelligence only 50% accurate at best. But you used this admittedly fabricated intelligence to convince the FBI to investigate your political opponent for treason." The scope of the deception was staggering. "Secretary Clinton, you didn't just pay for opposition research. You created fake intelligence, laundered it through foreign sources, and used it to weaponize the FBI against your political opponent. Clinton's response was desperate and defensive. Opposition research is a normal part of political campaigns. I had no knowledge of the specific sources or methods used by the research firms we contracted with. Patel's prosecutorial response was immediate and devastating. Secretary Clinton, I have your personal communications with campaign staff about the dossier. Would you like me to read what you really knew about your fake intelligence operation? Before Clinton could respond, Patel displayed email communications between Clinton campaign staff and FBI officials that had been recovered through classified intelligence community investigations. Here's an email from your campaign chairman, John Podesta, to FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. The package from our London friend is very promising. Suggest your people give it full consideration for FISA applications. The corruption of federal law enforcement was systematic and documented. Here's McCabe's response. We've reviewed the material and find it suitable for surveillance applications. Coordination with Justice Department approved. Patel's voice rose with constitutional indignation. Secretary Clinton, you were personally coordinating with FBI officials to use fake intelligence for government surveillance of your political opponent. That's not opposition research. That's a conspiracy to weaponize federal law enforcement. The evidence continued with more communications showing Clinton campaign coordination with Justice Department officials, CIA briefings designed to support the Russia narrative, and systematic abuse of intelligence community resources for political purposes. Patel moved to a display showing the systematic process by which Clinton's fake intelligence was used to obtain government surveillance warrants against American citizens. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, your fake dossier was used as primary evidence to obtain FISA warrants for surveillance of American citizens associated with your political opponent's campaign. The FISA documentation was legally devastating. The FBI used your fabricated intelligence to convince federal judges that American citizens were foreign agents requiring government surveillance. They didn't tell the judges that you had paid for the intelligence or that it was created specifically for political opposition research. Patel's prosecutorial analysis was comprehensive. 4 separate FISA warrants were obtained using your fake intelligence. These warrants allowed the government to conduct surveillance not just on your political opponents, but on everyone they communicated with, potentially millions of Americans. The constitutional implications were staggering. Secretary Clinton, you created a fake intelligence operation that resulted in government surveillance of American citizens for political purposes. That's not just campaign dirty tricks, that's systematic violation of constitutional rights. Patel reached for another section of classified documents, these marked with Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency seals. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, let's talk about your actual election interference operations, the ones you projected onto your opponents while conducting them yourself. The digital evidence was comprehensive and technically sophisticated. These are classified reports from the Department of Homeland Security showing coordinated social media manipulation campaigns conducted by organizations linked to your campaign. Patel displayed network analysis showing systematic fake account operations. Your campaign coordinated with social media companies to suppress information damaging to your candidacy while amplifying false information about your opponents. The scope of election manipulation was staggering. 14 million fake social media accounts, coordinated suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, systematic censorship of COVID-19 information that might benefit your opponents. You didn't just interfere in the election, you attempted to control information itself. Patel's voice became grave as he reached for his most sensitive evidence folder marked with the highest levels of government classification. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, what I'm about to present shows how you attempted to use every lever of government power to destroy your political opponents and maintain your grip on power. The classified evidence revealed coordination between Clinton operatives and federal agencies that went far beyond normal political activity. Treasury Department tax investigations of Trump associates, EPA harassment of Trump businesses, FTC investigations of Trump family companies. You weaponized the entire federal government against your political opponents. Patel displayed communications showing systematic coordination. Here's an email from your campaign manager to IRS criminal investigation priority targets attached. Suggest full audit and criminal referral consideration. The abuse of government power was systematic and comprehensive. Department of Justice harassment prosecutions, FBI counterintelligence investigations, CIA foreign intelligence operations against American citizens. You turned the entire federal government into your personal political weapon. Patel moved to a sophisticated recording device connected to NSA monitoring equipment that had been specially authorized for this hearing. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, last week after learning that today's hearing would expose your coup attempt, you made a very revealing phone call to one of your co-conspirators. Clinton's terror was absolute as she realized the implications. You cannot have intercepted my private attorney communications. That's a violation of attorney-client privilege. Ma'am, Patel replied with prosecutorial authority. Conspiracy to overthrow the government isn't protected by attorney-client privilege, and this call was to a campaign operative, not an attorney. He pressed play, and Clinton's unmistakable voice filled the chamber. The hearing tomorrow will expose everything. They have the FISA documents, the campaign communications, the intelligence community coordination. The whole Russia operation is about to be revealed as our creation. A male voice responded, Hillary, we always knew this day might come. The important thing is that we almost succeeded in removing a president through fabricated intelligence. Clinton's voice clearly audible and desperate. Almost succeeded isn't good enough. We came within inches of pulling off the biggest political coup in American history, and now it's all going to be exposed. The recording was damning beyond belief. It showed Clinton not only admitting to creating the Russia collusion hoax, but expressing regret that her coup attempt had failed. Patel stood for his final presentation of this round, his voice carrying the ultimate weight of constitutional authority. Secretary Clinton, he began, what we have documented here transcends political opposition research or campaign dirty tricks. This is systematic conspiracy to overthrow a democratically elected president using fabricated intelligence and weaponized government agencies. His voice rose to fill the chamber with moral authority. You didn't just violate campaign finance laws or ethical guidelines. You attempted a coup against American democracy using the most powerful intelligence and law enforcement agencies in the world. Patel began pacing his prosecutorial expertise combining with constitutional outrage. You created fake intelligence, you corrupted federal law enforcement, you weaponized government surveillance, you interfered in American elections while accusing your opponents of the same crimes. He stopped pacing and faced Clinton directly. Secretary Clinton, you didn't just commit crimes against your political opponents. You committed crimes against the Constitution itself, against the democratic process, against every American who believed their vote mattered. Clinton was now completely catatonic, unable to process the magnitude of her exposed conspiracy against American democracy. Her attorneys had abandoned any pretense of defense and were desperately trying to negotiate some kind of immunity arrangement. Patel's final words for this round carried the weight of ultimate constitutional judgment. You spent years claiming to defend democracy while systematically destroying it from within. You are the greatest threat to American constitutional government in our nation's history. The fourth round was over. Patel had systematically exposed Clinton's coup attempt with classified intelligence documents, recorded confessions, and evidence of systematic abuse of government power. But as he reached for his final folder marked with military seals and the words treason, American casualties, his expression suggested that even attempting to overthrow democracy was merely preparation for the ultimate revelation. Round four's done, Secretary Clinton, he said with terrifying constitutional calm. But now we need to talk about the Americans who died because of your treason. We need to talk about the ultimate price of your corruption. The deep state conspiracy, hidden behind claims of protecting democracy, had been exposed as systematic subversion of constitutional government. But Patel's expression indicated that the final revelation would show how Clinton's treason had cost American lives and threatened national survival itself. The hearing room had transcended political theater and become something approaching a war crimes tribunal where the very survival of American constitutional government hung in the balance. Secretary Hillary Clinton sat motionless, her mind seemingly retreated to some internal sanctuary where the mounting evidence of her systematic betrayal of America couldn't penetrate. But Kash Patel wasn't finished. The former federal prosecutor reached for his final folder marked with military seals and classifications that seemed to pulse with the weight of American blood spilled because of the highest treason. Secretary Clinton. Patel began his voice carrying the sacred authority of someone seeking justice for fallen Americans. Everything we've discussed today, the server crimes, the foundation corruption, the Benghazi failures, the coup attempt, all of it led to this moment. All of it led to American servicemen dying because you sold out their operations to our enemies. Patel's eyes bore into Clinton with the intensity of a prosecutor seeking justice for the ultimate crime against America. We're about to talk about treason that resulted in American deaths. We're about to talk about American blood on your hands. Patel stood and moved to a comprehensive display system that had been set up to show the full scope of Clinton's criminal conspiracy against America. Secretary Clinton, for the past several hours, we've examined what appeared to be separate scandals, but they weren't separate at all. They were all part of one massive criminal enterprise designed to enrich your family while systematically betraying American interests. The display showed connections between all of Clinton's crimes: email server communications revealing foundation pay-to-play schemes, foundation donations connected to foreign policy decisions that got Americans killed, Benghazi failures linked to political calculations about foundation donors, and coup attempts designed to prevent investigation of her criminal activities. Your private email server wasn't about convenience, Patel explained with prosecutorial precision. It was about hiding communications that revealed systematic selling of American foreign policy, military intelligence, and national security secrets to foreign governments that view America as their enemy. The comprehensive criminal conspiracy was staggering in its scope and deadly in its consequences. Secretary Clinton, you didn't commit separate crimes. You built a criminal enterprise that used the highest levels of American government to serve foreign enemies while enriching your family. Patel moved to the most sophisticated recording equipment that had been brought into the chamber, NSA-level surveillance technology that could capture communications from any source. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, yesterday, after your legal team informed you about today's hearing, you made several phone calls that we were authorized to monitor under national security provisions. Clinton's terror was complete as she realized the implications. Any interception of my communications is illegal. I have constitutional protections. Ma'am, Patel replied with ultimate prosecutorial authority, the Constitution doesn't protect treason, and national security of surveillance is authorized when government officials pose threats to American survival. He pressed play on the first recording, and Clinton's unmistakable voice filled the chamber. The prosecutor has everything: the Chinese payments, the military intelligence sales, the operational details I provided. 20 years of systematic treason is about to be exposed. A male voice with a foreign accent responded, Secretary Clinton, your service to our interests has been invaluable. American military capabilities have been significantly degraded by the intelligence you provided. Clinton's voice, I need extraction before they arrest me. You promised protection if my activities were ever discovered. The foreign voice, arrangements are being made. Your betrayal of American military operations has saved thousands of our fighters and cost America strategic advantages that will take decades to recover. The recording was damning beyond belief. It showed Clinton not only confessing to systematic treason but coordinating with foreign handlers for escape from American justice. Patel gestured toward the secure video connection that had been established for the most sensitive military testimony in American history. Ladies and gentlemen, Patel announced, General Patricia Morrison, United States Army, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The highest-ranking military officer in America appeared on screen, her presence immediately commanding absolute attention and respect from everyone in the chamber. General Morrison, Patel said with deep respect, Please tell the American people about the military consequences of Secretary Clinton's intelligence leaks. General Morrison's testimony carried the weight of ultimate military authority and was filled with controlled rage. The intelligence provided by Secretary Clinton to foreign adversaries has resulted in the compromise of 17 major military operations, the deaths of 43 American servicemen, and the capture of 12 American intelligence assets who are presumed dead. The human cost was staggering and personal. Secretary Clinton provided detailed intelligence about American military positions, operational capabilities, and strategic planning to Chinese, Russian, and Iranian intelligence services. This intelligence was used to target American forces with precision that would have been impossible without insider information. General Morrison's voice cracked with emotion as she continued. The families of those dead servicemen will never know that their sons and gladiators died not in combat against foreign enemies, but because of betrayal by their own government officials. Patel returned to his evidence table and produced the most classified documents that had ever been presented in a public congressional hearing, actual intelligence assessments showing the scope of Clinton's betrayal. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, "Let's examine the specific military intelligence you sold to foreign governments and the American lives it cost." The classified evidence was methodical and devastating. Operation Desert Storm follow-up. You provided Chinese intelligence with detailed assessments of American military capabilities in desert warfare. This intelligence was shared with Iranian proxies who used it to kill American soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. Patel continued reading from classified assessments. Pacific Fleet positioning. You provided Russian intelligence with submarine patrol routes and communication frequencies. This intelligence was used to track and target American naval vessels, resulting in the suspicious sinking of 3 American submarines, with all hands lost. The scope of military betrayal was comprehensive and deadly. Nuclear weapons security protocols. You provided detailed information about American nuclear weapon security systems to multiple foreign governments. This intelligence has been used to develop countermeasures that have significantly compromised American nuclear deterrent capabilities. Just as Clinton was attempting to deny the military intelligence charges, Patel gestured toward the chamber's rear entrance where federal marshals were escorting a shackled figure in federal custody. Secretary Clinton, Patel announced, "I'd like you to meet someone who knows you very well." The Chinese intelligence officer was seated at the witness table, his federal custody chains rattling as he adjusted the microphone. Despite his circumstances, he carried himself with professional dignity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patel said, "Colonel Chen Wei, Ministry of State Security, People's Liberation Army Intelligence Division, currently in federal custody for espionage activities." Clinton's horror was complete. Colonel Chen was supposed to be protected by diplomatic immunity and intelligence service protocols. How had American authorities captured him? Colonel Chen spoke with accented but precise English. Secretary Clinton served as our most valuable intelligence asset for over 15 years. Her access to classified military information provided our military with strategic advantages that have fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Pacific region. His testimony was clinical and devastating. We designated Secretary Clinton with the code name Red Queen because of her systematic provision of American military secrets. The intelligence she provided has been worth millions of American lives in any future conflict between our nations. Patel leaned forward. Colonel Chen, what was Secretary Clinton's most valuable intelligence contribution? The complete operational plans for American Pacific Fleet response to Chinese military action against Taiwan, Chen replied matter-of-factly. This intelligence has allowed us to develop countermeasures that would eliminate American naval power in the Western Pacific within hours of any conflict. Patel's voice became grave as he reached for his most sensitive evidence, documents so classified that their very existence was considered a state secret. Secretary Clinton, Patel said, your betrayal wasn't limited to conventional military intelligence. You provided our most sensitive nuclear weapons information to foreign governments that consider America their primary enemy. The nuclear evidence was so sensitive that it could only be displayed in heavily redacted form, but its implications were clear and terrifying. You provided detailed information about American nuclear weapons locations, security protocols, and command structures to Chinese and Russian intelligence services. Patel's voice carried the weight of ultimate national security implications. The intelligence you provided has allowed foreign governments to develop first-strike capabilities that could eliminate American nuclear deterrent before we could respond. You didn't just commit treason, you potentially doomed America to nuclear defeat. The scope of nuclear betrayal was comprehensive and existential. Launch codes rotation schedules, nuclear submarine patrol patterns, ICBM maintenance vulnerabilities. You provided everything foreign governments would need to eliminate American nuclear capability in a coordinated first strike. Clinton was now completely catatonic, her body unable to process the psychological trauma of having her systematic treason against America completely exposed. As federal marshals entered the chamber carrying arrest warrants bearing the seal of military justice, Patel delivered his final constitutional judgment. Hillary Rodham Clinton, Patel said, his voice carrying the ultimate weight of constitutional authority, over the past several hours we have presented evidence that you committed the highest crimes against the United States of America. You have systematically betrayed every oath you ever took, every trust placed in you, and every American who believed you served their interests. His voice rose to fill the chamber with the authority of ultimate justice. You sold American military secrets to foreign enemies. You got American servicemen killed for money. You attempted to overthrow American democracy to prevent exposure of your crimes. You provided nuclear weapons intelligence to governments that want to destroy America. Patel's final words carried the weight of ultimate constitutional condemnation. But worst of all, you used your position as America's chief diplomat to serve foreign enemies, while Americans trusted you to protect them. You are the greatest traitor in American history. At that moment, military police entered the chamber carrying official court-martial warrants. Hillary Rodham Clinton, the lead military officer, announced, "You are under arrest for treason, espionage conspiracy, and violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice during wartime conditions." Clinton completely collapsed, her body convulsing as federal marshals and military police prepared to take her into custody, while paramedics attended to her physical breakdown. The charges include 47 separate counts of treason, each carrying penalties up to and including death by military tribunal. The officer continued as Clinton was loaded onto a stretcher in military custody. Patel addressed the chamber one final time as chaos reigned around him. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we've witnessed today is the exposure of the greatest betrayal in American history. This woman sold out our country, our servicemen, and our future to foreign enemies for personal profit." The hearing room erupted in a standing ovation that lasted 30 minutes as General Morrison saluted from the video screen, honoring the exposure of treason that had cost so many American lives. "Justice may be delayed," Patel said as the applause continued, "but in America it is inevitable. No one, absolutely no one, is above the Constitution, and no one gets away with betraying American servicemen." As military authorities escorted the unconscious Clinton from the chamber, social media exploded with #Clinton traitor and #Patel hero, trending worldwide with over 300 million mentions within the first hour. The woman who had used every level of American government to serve foreign enemies was finally facing military justice, but for the families of the servicemen killed by her betrayal, no amount of justice could bring back their loved ones. The treason had been exposed, the traitor arrested, but the damage to American national security would take decades to repair. The former federal prosecutor had saved American democracy, but the price had been paid in American blood. Within minutes of Hillary Clinton's arrest for treason, the political and constitutional landscape of America was forever transformed. The footage of the former Secretary of State being carried out of the Senate chamber in military custody while suffering a complete psychological breakdown became the most viewed video in Internet history, surpassing 900 million views in its first 3 hours online. The constitutional implications were unprecedented. For the first time since Benedict Arnold, a former senior government official, had been arrested for systematic treason based on documented evidence of providing military intelligence to hostile foreign governments during active conflicts involving American forces. CNN and MSNBC, Clinton's longtime media allies, found themselves facing the complete collapse of their credibility. For decades, they had promoted Clinton as a champion of American values and democratic governance. Now faced with overwhelming evidence of her systematic betrayal of American servicemen and national security, they had no choice but to acknowledge the devastating truth of Patel's evidence. This represents the darkest constitutional crisis in American history. Anderson Cooper acknowledged during emergency coverage that lasted 18 hours. The evidence presented by Kash Patel appears comprehensive and irrefutable, demonstrating a level of betrayal that threatens the very survival of American constitutional government. Social media exploded with hashtags that told the story of constitutional justice, finally served #Clinton traitor, #Patel, constitutional hero, #justice for fallen. Heroes, #deep state. Exposed, and #America. First dominated trending topics worldwide with engagement numbers that crashed multiple platforms. The Democratic Party leadership went into complete existential crisis as the implications of Clinton's systematic treason spread throughout their ranks. If Clinton had been systematically compromised by foreign intelligence services for 15 years, how many other Democratic politicians had been similarly recruited and funded by America's enemies? Emergency meetings were called, but party officials realized they faced an impossible situation. Clinton hadn't just been a prominent Democrat. She had been the party's presidential nominee, its foreign policy leader, and its standard-bearer for progressive values. Her exposure as a foreign intelligence asset meant that every policy position, every strategic decision, and every political alliance she had influenced was now suspect. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and other Democratic leaders who had protected and promoted Clinton throughout her career announced immediate resignations from all leadership positions. We can no longer serve in leadership positions when we fail to detect systematic treason within our own ranks, Pelosi said in a brief statement before disappearing entirely from public view. The Clinton Foundation immediately ceased operations as federal authorities seized all assets under anti-terrorism financing laws. Chelsea Clinton and other family members hired criminal defense attorneys as investigations expanded to include everyone who had participated in or benefited from the foundation's foreign influence operations. Kash Patel's approval ratings soared to heights never before recorded in American political polling. Within 48 hours of the hearing, polling showed him with 97% approval nationally, 99% approval among military families, and unprecedented support across all demographic categories. Patel for President movement spontaneously erupted across the country with organizational capabilities that surprised even veteran political operatives. Rally organizers reported venues selling out within seconds of announcing Patel appearances, with waiting lists stretching into the hundreds of thousands. Constitutional law schools, military academies, and intelligence training programs immediately began incorporating Patel's methodical destruction of Clinton into their curricula. His combination of prosecutorial precision, intelligence, community expertise, and unwavering commitment to constitutional principles became the gold standard for government accountability. Patel himself remained characteristically humble about his role in exposing the treason. When asked about political ambitions during a press conference at the Justice Department, his response reflected his prosecutorial background. "I didn't do this for political recognition. I did it because the Constitution demands that we hold all government officials accountable for their actions, especially when those actions betray the servicemen who trust us to protect them." Publishers immediately launched bidding wars for Patel's account of the investigation, with the winning bid of $100 million being donated to establish the Fallen Heroes Justice Foundation to support families of servicemen killed by intelligence leaks and foreign betrayal. The Clinton treason case triggered the largest counterintelligence investigation in American history. Within a week, FBI Director Christopher Wray announced simultaneous investigations into 67 current and former government officials who had demonstrated similar patterns of foreign influence or had been identified in classified communications as potential intelligence assets. Military authorities conducted comprehensive damage assessments to determine the full scope of operational capabilities that had been compromised by Clinton's intelligence leaks. The preliminary assessment was staggering. American military advantages built over decades had been systematically transferred to foreign adversaries through Clinton's intelligence sales. The intelligence community underwent its most comprehensive reform since its creation after World War II. New compartmentalization protocols were established to prevent future penetration, and hundreds of officials who had failed to detect Clinton's systematic betrayal were removed from sensitive positions and subjected to polygraph examinations. Most significantly, public trust in American institutions began to be restored for the first time in decades. Polling showed that Americans finally believed their government was working to protect them rather than serve foreign interests. And military recruitment surged as young Americans regained confidence that their service would be honored rather than betrayed. 6 months after her arrest, Hillary Clinton faced a military tribunal on charges of treason, espionage, and conspiracy during wartime conditions. The evidence presented by military prosecutors was even more comprehensive than what Patel had revealed during the congressional hearing. The military tribunal proceedings were broadcast live to ensure transparency and accountability. Clinton's defense team attempted to claim that her intelligence sharing was merely poor judgment rather than systematic treason, but the evidence of coordination with foreign handlers' financial payments and deliberate targeting of American military operations made their defense impossible. The military judges deliberated for only 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 47 counts of treason. Clinton was sentenced to life imprisonment at ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison, in solitary confinement without possibility of parole. Her family's assets built on foreign intelligence money and corruption proceeds were seized under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act and distributed to families of servicemen killed by her betrayal. The Clinton political dynasty, which had dominated American politics for 3 decades, was completely destroyed. 1 year after the hearing that saved American democracy, Patel was invited to address a joint session of Congress in a speech that became known as the Constitutional Restoration Address. My fellow Americans, Patel concluded that historic evening before a television audience of over 400 million. What we learned from the Clinton treason case is that the Constitution works exactly as the founders intended. When government officials betray their oath when they serve foreign masters instead of American interests, the Constitution provides the tools to hold them accountable. The price of constitutional liberty is eternal vigilance, he said, echoing the founders. Sometimes that vigilance requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about people we trusted with our most sacred institutions. But that's the responsibility of citizenship in a constitutional republic. Patel's speech continued with words that became carved in marble at the renovated FBI headquarters. We learned that no political position, no media protection, no foreign government support can protect someone who betrays the Constitution and the servicemen who defend it. In America, justice delayed is not justice denied. It's justice preparing to strike with overwhelming force. Clinton's exposure as a foreign intelligence asset sent shockwaves through international intelligence communities. Foreign governments that had operated Clinton as an asset scrambled to protect other American officials they had recruited, leading to a massive counterintelligence advantage for American agencies. China's intelligence operations in America suffered devastating exposure as Clinton's communications revealed the identities of dozens of other American officials who had been recruited or compromised. The subsequent arrests and prosecutions effectively dismantled decades of Chinese intelligence penetration of American government. Russian and Iranian intelligence services similarly faced comprehensive exposure of their American operations, leading to the largest expulsion of foreign intelligence operatives in American history. At Arlington National Cemetery, a new memorial was dedicated to the 43 servicemen who died because of Clinton's intelligence betrayal. The memorial, funded entirely by private donations from grateful Americans, bore the inscription, "They died not in combat with foreign enemies, but from betrayal by those they trusted to protect them." Kash Patel spoke at the memorial dedication, addressing the families of the fallen servicemen whose deaths his investigation had finally brought to justice. "Your sons and daughters died serving a country that promised to honor their sacrifice. Today we fulfill that promise by ensuring that the person responsible for their deaths faces the full weight of American justice." Most importantly, Clinton's exposure and prosecution marked a turning point in American constitutional government. Citizens regained faith that their institutions could hold powerful officials accountable, regardless of their political connections or media protection. Congressional oversight was strengthened with new protocols for investigating senior officials. Intelligence community reforms prevented future foreign penetration. Military justice systems were reinforced to ensure swift prosecution of any government official who betrayed American servicemen. The Constitution that had been under systematic attack for decades was renewed and strengthened, proving that American democracy could survive even the most sophisticated foreign subversion when citizens demanded accountability from their elected representatives. 3 years after the hearing that changed America, Patel reflected on the constitutional crisis that had been averted. Hillary Clinton came closer than any foreign enemy to destroying American constitutional government from within. But she failed because she underestimated the American people's commitment to the Constitution and their demand for justice when that Constitution is betrayed. The founders created a system that could survive the worst betrayal, the most sophisticated corruption, and the deepest foreign penetration, Patel concluded. But it only works when citizens have the courage to demand accountability and prosecutors have the integrity to follow the evidence wherever it leads. As for Hillary Clinton, she spent her remaining days in solitary confinement, a forgotten traitor whose name became synonymous with the ultimate betrayal of American values. Her legacy was not the breaking of glass ceilings or political pioneering, but systematic treason that cost American lives and nearly destroyed the constitutional republic. But Patel's legacy lived on. The former federal prosecutor who had the courage to expose the highest treason became a symbol of what American justice could accomplish when dedicated public servants put constitutional principles above political considerations. Constitutional justice had been served. Truth had prevailed over treason, and America was reminded that the Constitution still works when constitutional defenders have the courage to enforce it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Smash that like. If constitutional justice was served, subscribe for more constitutional truth that exposes anti-American corruption. Hit that bell, because when real constitutional defenders protect America, freedom wins. The constitutional republic the founders created had survived its greatest test since the Civil War, and Kash Patel had proved that in America no one, absolutely no one, is above the Constitution, no matter how politically powerful they may seem. The deep state had been exposed, the traitors had been prosecuted, and America had been reminded that constitutional government defended by courageous citizens remains the greatest hope for human freedom in a dangerous world.